I'm Sarah, and this is the tale of how my husband believed he could outwit me. It began with secrets murmured in the shadows, bank transactions I never authorized, and a name, Ilya Morrow, that was utterly unfamiliar. Dean, my husband, wasn't merely plotting to abandon me. He was scheming to strip me of everything. But he misjudged me. He thought I'd collapse under the weight of his betrayal. Instead, I struck first, safeguarding what was mine. A week later, his elaborate plan imploded spectacularly. Yet, the true horror wasn't just his treachery. It was the chilling realization of how long he'd been orchestrating it, how many falsehoods he'd woven. The depth of his deception, the lengths he'd gone to ruin me, left me reeling. I woke to an empty bed, the sheets beside me cold, whispering that Dean had been absent for hours. At first, I wondered if he'd slipped to the bathroom or wandered for a glass of water. But as I sat up, wiping sleep from my eyes, a faint murmur reached me. His voice, low, guarded, deliberate. The hallway was shrouded in darkness, but a sliver of moonlight spilled through the window, casting eerie shadows across the floor. My stomach churned as I crept toward the sound, curiosity warring with dread. Just a bit longer. She hasn't caught on yet, he said, his tone smooth, almost soothing, as if placating someone. If you enjoyed this story and it touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on future stories. I froze mid-step, my breath catching in my throat. Dean's voice was calm, calculated, like he was reassuring a co-conspirator. My heart thundered against my ribs. Who was he speaking to? I strained to catch more, but his words grew muffled, sinking to a barely audible whisper. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't a late-night work call. Dean never hushed his voice for business. He'd never cared if I overheard his professional chats before. My mind spiraled through possibilities, each more sinister than the last, suspense tightening its grip on me. Seconds later, I heard his footsteps approaching. I barely had time to dart back to the bedroom before he appeared around the corner. My pulse hammered as I slid beneath the covers, feigning sleep. The bed dipped as he settled beside me, his presence heavy with unspoken secrets. Minutes ticked by, then he exhaled, slow and relaxed, as if nothing was amiss. I turned over, blinking up at him. "Where were you?" My voice was soft, groggy, masking the storm inside me. "Bathroom," he muttered, without a flicker of hesitation. A blatant lie. "And the phone call?" I pressed, watching for any crack in his facade. Dean barely flinched. "Just a client. Had to iron out some case details." His eyes met mine, unreadable as always. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just work. But those words, "she hasn't caught on yet," lodged in my throat like a shard of glass. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to turn away. Not tonight, I told myself, though my mind screamed for answers. The next morning, I rose before Dean. He lay sprawled across the bed, his arm flung over the pillow where my head should have been, oblivious to the chaos he'd stirred. I slipped out, grabbed my phone, and padded barefoot to the kitchen, dread pooling in my chest. I rarely checked our bank accounts. Dean managed most of our finances, and I'd never questioned it. But something felt wrong, a nagging instinct I couldn't shake. I scrolled through the transactions, and my stomach twisted. $500, $1,200, $750, $2,000. A string of withdrawals over the past 3 months, small but frequent, like drops of poison accumulating in a glass. Dean and I shared expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, but we kept separate accounts for personal spending. These weren't for bills, investments, or anything we'd ever discussed. My hands trembled around my phone, the screen a silent accusation. Footsteps sounded behind me. I locked the screen and turned to find Dean in the doorway, rubbing his neck. "Morning," he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "What's for breakfast?" I set my phone down, forcing a smile. "Was about to ask you the same." He smirked, stepping forward to pour coffee. "Guess it's your turn then." I watched him sip, his free hand resting casually on the counter, and took a breath. I checked our bank account this morning. Dean froze, just for a heartbeat, his grip tightening on the mug before he forced a chuckle. There are lots of small withdrawals, I said, crossing my arms. Things I don't recognize. He didn't miss a beat. Just small investments. Business ventures. His tone was dismissive, but his eyes flickered. Business ventures? I echoed, my voice steady despite the storm inside. He nodded, setting his cup down. Nothing to worry about. Short-term gains, that's all. He was lying. I felt it in my bones, though I didn't know why. The rest of the day, I tried to shake the unease, but Dean made it impossible. He was glued to his phone, taking calls in hushed tones, his screen always face down when he set it on the table. Every glance at him felt like staring at a stranger, a wall of secrets rising between us. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind refused to rest. Dean was always charismatic, a smooth talker who could charm his way out of anything. But I'd known him long enough to sense when something was off, and something was gravely off. I turned to face him. He was asleep, his breathing even, his face serene, like a man with no burdens. I wasn't fooled. A voice in my head whispered the question I'd been dodging all day. Am I paranoid, or is something truly wrong? The doubt clung to me, even as dawn's light crept through the window. I'd spent the night tossing and turning, unable to silence the echo of Dean's voice, casual, dismissive, yet laced with intent. I dragged myself through my morning routine, my movements mechanical, my thoughts trapped in a loop of every red flag I'd ignored. Then Dean sauntered into the kitchen, all ease and charm. "Morning, babe," he said, brushing a kiss against my temple. "I was thinking we should get our financials organized. You know, for emergencies." I froze, my fingers tightening around my coffee mug. "Our financials?" I repeated, my voice careful. "Yeah," he said, leaning against the counter, sipping his coffee like this was just another day. "Do you have a list of your accounts, passwords, assets? We should keep it all in one place." My pulse roared in my ears. Dean had never cared about my personal finances. We had a joint account for bills, but our savings were separate, always had been. I forced a neutral expression. "I guess I could pull something together." His lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed him, flickering for a split second. He nodded, shifting the conversation, but my mind was racing. This wasn't about us. Dean was plotting something, and he didn't want me to see it coming. That evening, Dean was unnervingly calm. He laughed at the TV, scrolled through his phone, even suggested ordering takeout, playing the part of the perfect husband with chilling precision. It made my skin crawl. Something had shifted. The way he moved, the way he spoke, all too polished, too practiced. Then it happened. Dean stood to take a shower, leaving his phone on the coffee table. He never left his phone unattended, ever. I stared at it, my heart pounding. The screen was face down, as it had been for weeks. But then, as if fate itself intervened, a notification flashed across the screen, a text from a name I didn't know. Ilya Morrow. My hands trembled as I reached for Dean's phone, the screen glowing with a secret I wasn't meant to see. My heart raced, curiosity and dread colliding as I tilted it just enough to glimpse the message preview. "Keep her clueless. We're nearly done." My breath caught, a sharp pain gripping my chest. The room seemed to shrink, walls pressing in with suffocating intensity. Who was Ilya Morrow? And what did nearly done mean? My finger hovered over the screen, wild theories flashing through my mind. Was this a lover, a scheme to abandon me, a plot to siphon our money? The shower's hum stopped abruptly. Panic surged through me. I placed the phone back exactly as it was, sinking into the couch, gripping my knees to still my shaking hands. Moments later, Dean sauntered in, towel drying his hair, his face a mask of calm. He was oblivious to the truth I'd just glimpsed, or so he thought. "Decided on dinner yet?" he asked, ruffling his hair with infuriating ease. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Not yet." He grabbed his phone, unlocking it with a casual swipe, no trace of guilt, as if he had nothing to hide. But I knew better now. That night, I wrestled with what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it was innocent. Maybe Ilya was a coworker, a business contact. Maybe keeping me clueless referred to something mundane. But deep down, the truth gnawed at me. The clues were aligning like puzzle pieces: his secretive calls, the vanishing money, that hushed midnight conversation, his sudden obsession with my finances. I should have confronted him then, demanded answers. But if Dean was orchestrating something this massive, I needed undeniable proof. So I stayed silent. I let him kiss me goodnight, let him slide under the covers as if all was well, while I lay there, clutching my phone, whispering into the darkness, "Who is Ilya Morrow?" If you enjoyed this story and it touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on future stories. The next morning, that name haunted me, a relentless riddle refusing to fade. I drifted through my routine like a specter, my mind fixated on Ilya Morrow, a piece of this mystery that didn't belong. Dean sat across from me at breakfast, scrolling through his phone, the picture of nonchalance. I wondered if he suspected I'd seen the message. If he did, he was a masterful liar. Then, as if he felt my scrutiny, he looked up, flashing a disarming smile. "Hey, babe, can you sign something quick?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "Sign what?" I asked, keeping my tone light, though suspense coiled in my gut. "Just some financial updates for taxes," he said, sliding a document across the table. His voice was casual, but his fingers tapped the table in a nervous rhythm, a telltale crack in his facade. My stomach twisted as I skimmed the papers. The legal jargon was dense, but one thing was glaringly clear: this wasn't about taxes. I flipped to the final page, a property transfer agreement. My pulse thundered. My assets, my savings, even the condo, everything would shift to his name. I forced myself to meet his gaze. He watched me, a calculated smile fixed in place. "Dean," I said, my voice unnaturally steady. "What is this?" His smile didn't waver. "Just a precaution, babe. Legal convenience. Nothing changes between us." I stared at him, my grip tightening on the paper. "Nothing changes? You're asking me to hand over everything." "Not everything," he countered smoothly, as if that softened the blow. "Just streamlining things for protection, in case something happens." My hands shook, not with fear, but with fury. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was a deliberate, cold-blooded plan. He had the gall to sit there, acting like it was trivial. Slowly, deliberately, I set the document down and locked eyes with him. "I'm not signing this." His smile twitched, his jaw tightening for a fleeting moment before he forced a laugh. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork." I held my ground. "Then why are you so desperate for me to sign without reading it?" His expression darkened, a shadow crossing his face. "You really don't want to do this, Sarah," he said, leaning in, his voice low, controlled, but laced with a chilling edge, a warning, a threat. I met his stare, unflinching. "Is that a threat, Dean?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned back, arms crossed, his face shifting into an unsettling calm, the smirk gone. "I just think you're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his tone too polished, too measured. I swallowed my rage, keeping my face neutral. He still believed he held the upper hand, that I was just a pawn in his meticulous game. I let the silence linger, watching him, the restless tap of his fingers, the faint twitch in his jaw when I didn't react. He expected me to crumble, to lash out, to give him an opening. I refused to play his game. With a faint smile, just enough to unsettle him, I stood, gathering the papers. "You know what, Dean? You're right. I do need to think about this." His eyes narrowed, caught off guard by my composure. I turned away, placing the documents neatly on the kitchen counter, my heart pounding with newfound resolve. I wouldn't argue, not now, not yet, because now I was the one steering this chessboard. That night, Dean moved through our home like nothing had changed, pouring a drink, watching the news, scrolling his phone, as if he hadn't just tried to trick me into surrendering everything I owned. But as I watched him, A heavy truth settled in my chest. This was never about preserving our marriage. He wasn't trying to mend things. He was paving his escape route, determined to take everything with him. The next morning, I found him in the living room, sipping coffee, exuding an air of untouchable confidence. But when I sat across from him, his eyes flicked up, sensing a shift in the air. "We need to talk," he said, setting his cup down. I tilted my head, waiting. He exhaled, as if this pained him, as if he were the one burdened. "I think we should separate." There it was, delivered like a rehearsed monologue, every word polished to perfection. "It's not working anymore," he continued, his tone steady. "You have to see that." I stared at him, unmoving. He wasn't proposing a divorce, he was declaring it, as if I had no say. I let the silence stretch, then leaned forward. "You've been planning this, haven't you?" A flicker of something, guilt, fear, crossed his face, gone in an instant. "It's for the best, Sarah. We've drifted apart." Drifted apart? That was his excuse? I rested my arms on the table, my voice low, deliberate. "You mean you want out, but you want to make sure you don't leave empty-handed." His lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't deny it. The silence between us crackled with unspoken truths, the weight of his betrayal heavy in the air. I held his gaze, letting the drama of the moment simmer, knowing this was only the beginning of unraveling his carefully laid plans. I could have unleashed my fury, hurled the nearest object across the room, but a fierce resolve had taken root within me, cold and unyielding. So, I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head with deliberate calm, and spoke the words that shifted the tide. "I've already secured my assets, Dean." His body stiffened, a sharp intake of breath betraying him, subtle, but I caught it. "What's that supposed to mean?" His voice was too crisp, too restrained, laced with a rising panic he couldn't mask. I smiled, slow and calculated. "Exactly what you think it means." His jaw tightened, and in that moment, I saw it, the flicker of realization that he'd been outplayed. For months, he'd woven his intricate scheme, every detail crafted to ensure his victory. But he'd underestimated me, and that stung him deeply. A heavy silence stretched between us, charged with unspoken tension. Then, with a sharp exhale, Dean stood, grabbing his coffee and taking a deliberate sip. He turned to me, his smile returning, but it was icy, menacing. "You'll regret this, Sarah." Was it a threat or a desperate bluff? Either way, I was ready. He'd played his cards, and now the game was mine. The morning air felt thick, oppressive, as I moved through my routine. The coffee was bitter on my tongue, the apartment's silence pressing against me like a living thing. I tried to shake off Dean's chilling words from the night before, but a sharp, official knock at the door shattered my resolve. I set my mug down, steadied my breath, and opened the door. A man in a navy blazer stood there, expressionless, holding a thick envelope. "Sarah Keller?" He extended it toward me. "You've been served." My fingers tightened around the documents as he walked away, the envelope's weight heavier than it had any right to be. I didn't need to open it to know its contents, but I forced myself to sit at the kitchen table, exhaling harshly before tearing it open. The words stared back at me. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I skimmed further, my eyes locking on the financial demands. Dean wasn't just walking away, he was claiming half of everything. The condo, the car, 50% of our shared assets, and with breathtaking audacity, spousal support. A bitter laugh escaped me, shaking my head. Of course, he believed he could strip me bare. He'd been plotting this for months, perhaps years, the man I'd married revealing a cold, calculating core. The scent of polished wood and crisp paper filled the air as I sat across from my attorney, Patricia. She flipped through the documents, a smirk tugging at her lips as she reached the financial breakdown. "Well," she said, tapping her nails on the desk, "he's got nothing." I raised a brow, suspense tightening my chest. "Just like that?" She glanced up amused. "Just like that. You moved everything into a trust before he filed. Legally, he has no claim. He can push for spousal support, but with your income history compared to his, it's a lost cause." I exhaled slowly, the tension in my shoulders easing. For the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of control. Dean had thought he was the mastermind, but he'd misjudged me. That evening, I just poured a glass of wine when the front door slammed open. I didn't flinch. Dean stood there, fury radiating from him like a storm, his tie askew, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" His voice was venomous, cutting through the air. I took a slow sip of wine, savoring the way his anger coiled around him, chaotic and desperate. "I think I'm finally defending myself," I replied, my tone calm but laced with defiance. His fists clenched at his sides. "You planned this." I set my glass down, tilting my head. "So did you." The silence between us was electric, thick with unspoken accusations. Then, with a sharp exhale, his eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a low mutter. "This isn't over." I held his gaze, unflinching. I'd won the first skirmish, but the war was just beginning. A flicker of relief stirred within me, knowing I'd severed his financial hold, but I should have known Dean wouldn't retreat quietly. Trouble brewed at work the next day. It started with lingering stares, not casual glances but pointed, judgmental looks that hushed when I entered a room. By mid-morning, my assistant, Rachel, hesitated at my office door, her discomfort palpable. "Hey, I think you should know something," she said, wringing her hands. I looked up from my laptop, already weary. "What is it?" She shifted, uneasy. "There's a rumor going around." I wasn't going to say anything, but she trailed off, swallowing hard. "Just tell me, Rachel." She sighed, reluctant. "People are saying you siphon money from your joint accounts, that you were laundering funds." The words hit like a physical blow, fury igniting in my chest. "What?" I snapped. "I don't believe it," she added quickly. "But Dean, he's been talking to lawyers, mutual friends." The story's spreading. My stomach churned, rage burning like wildfire. Dean wasn't just after my money. He was trying to destroy my reputation, to paint me as the villain in his twisted narrative. By the time I reached Patricia's office, I was barely containing my anger. "This needs to end now," I said, slamming a stack of printed screenshots onto her desk, my hands trembling with rage. She skimmed them, letting out a dry chuckle. "Well, he's certainly desperate." "He's slandering me?" I said, my voice tight. "Yes, but we can use that," she replied, leaning back, tapping her pen against the desk. "If he's spreading false claims, he's opening himself up to defamation charges. We send a cease and desist first. If he ignores it, we escalate." I clench my jaw. I don't want this dragging out in court. I just want him to stop. Patricia sighed. "He's trying to provoke you, Sarah. He wants you to lose control." I turned to see Beatrice, her paralegal, standing by the door with a knowing look. "You can't let him dictate your next move," she added, stepping forward. "React too quickly, and he wins." I swallowed my fury, nodding stiffly, but inside, I was seething. Dean wanted a battle. He was about to get one. I found him at LaRue, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, laughing over drinks with two colleagues, utterly unfazed, as if he hadn't spent days dragging my name through the mud. The sight of him, so smug, so untouched, made my blood boil. But I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. With deliberate calm, I approached his table, leaned down, and let the weight of my presence silence their chatter. The drama of the moment hung heavy, my gaze locked on his, a silent promise that his game was far from over. I leaned in close, my voice a low whisper, dripping with defiance. "You have no clue what you've unleashed, Dean." His smirk wavered for a fleeting moment before he cloaked it with a cocky grin, wiping his mouth with a napkin, his eyes glinting with a challenge. "Let's see what you're made of, then." I'd given him one final warning, but my patience was spent. Dean had spent weeks manipulating, intimidating, and scheming to control me, underestimating me at every turn. After failing to seize my wealth and tarnishing my reputation, he was making one last, desperate lunge. A cornered man is a dangerous one, and the suspense of his next move hung heavy. Halfway through my morning coffee, my phone buzzed with an urgent call from Patricia, my lawyer. I answered, sensing the gravity before she spoke. "You need to come in now," she said, her tone clipped. A chill ran through me as I set my mug down, steadying my breath. "On what grounds?" I asked. Patricia exhaled sharply. "Dean's filed for a full financial audit, claiming you mishandled joint funds and owe him a settlement. It's baseless, but that's not the point." My chest tightened with bitter realization. "He's trying to bleed me dry," I muttered. "Legal fees, time, stress. He knows he can't win, so he's dragging this out." "Exactly," Patricia confirmed. Fury simmered within me, but Dean didn't play for outright victory. He played to exhaust his opponent. "Not this time." "I'll be there in an hour," I said, hanging up. When I strode into Patricia's office, she had Dean's motions sprawled across her desk, marked in red ink. "Good news," she said, glancing up. "He has no credible evidence." "Bad news?" "This could drag on for weeks, maybe months, if the court indulges his tactics." I clenched my fists, determination hardening. "What's our move?" She leaned forward. "We counterfile, request an immediate dismissal, and demand he covers all legal costs if the court sees this as a delay tactic." I smirked. "Let's do it." 2 weeks later, I sat across from Dean in a courtroom, the air thick with tension. He was impeccably dressed, his tie slightly too tight, his smirk barely concealed, as if this were his moment of triumph. His lawyer rose first. "Your Honor, my client believes Mrs. Keller improperly transferred assets to evade a fair divorce settlement. We request a full forensic audit of all financial transactions from the past 6 months." I remained stone-faced, unshaken. Patricia, cool and composed, adjusted her glasses and stood. "Your Honor, all of my client's financial moves were made before Mr. Keller filed for divorce. There's no evidence of mismanagement or fraud." She slid a thick binder forward. "Additionally, we request this motion be dismissed with prejudice and that Mr. Keller cover all legal fees, as this is blatant financial harassment." The judge reviewed the documents, their expression unreadable, the room charged with silent anticipation. Dean's eyes bored into me, waiting for a crack in my resolve. I gave him nothing. Finally, the judge spoke. "The court finds no grounds for financial audit. The motion is denied. Furthermore, due to lack of evidence, Mr. Keller will cover all associated legal fees." The gavel's sharp clap echoed, and just like that, Dean's gambit crumbled. Outside the courtroom, he brushed past me, his voice a low hiss. "You think this is over? Just wait." Another victory, but I knew Dean wasn't done. Men like him never surrendered quietly. The next morning, my phone rang, Patricia's voice tight with urgency. "Sarah, we have a problem." I gripped the phone, dread coiling in my gut. "What now?" A pause, then the rustle of papers. "Dean and Ilya have filed a formal complaint, accusing you of financial fraud. They claim you've been falsifying records for months." The air vanished from my lungs, the world tilting. If this stuck, I faced more than financial loss. Criminal charges loomed. "They submitted documents," Patricia continued, her tone grim. "If the court takes this seriously, you'll be dragged into a criminal investigation." I pressed my fingers to my temple, forcing calm. "Are the documents real?" A scoff came through the line. "Absolutely not, but they're convincing. Someone forged them well." Of course, Ilya, the shadowy puppet master behind Dean's schemes. But Patricia's voice brightened. "Beatrice reviewed them before I called. She found something." My heart leapt, a flicker of hope piercing the suspense. "What?" "The timestamps on the transfers, they're forged. The accounts they reference didn't even exist when those transactions allegedly occurred." I exhaled sharply, relief mingling with resolve. That was their fatal error, the crack that would shatter their lies. Fear gave way to a razor-sharp determination. Dean wanted war, and I was ready to end it. At Patricia's office, I made my choice, resolve burning in my chest. "I'm not just defending myself," I said, pressing my palms to her desk. I want to crush them, clear my name, and take them down. Patricia studied me, then nodded, a glint of approval in her eyes. Good. We have enough to do it. She gestured to a folder. A forensic financial analyst confirmed Beatrice's findings. The documents are fraudulent. Her smile was sharp, satisfied. We file a motion proving the fraud, then sue Dean and Ilya for defamation and falsifying evidence. I nodded. And I want full damages. Patricia leaned back, pleased. I figured you would. 2 weeks later, I faced Dean in court for the final time, my gaze locked on him, searching for cracks in his composure. Patricia presented our case with surgical precision. These documents, submitted against my client, are fabricated. We have irrefutable proof the listed transactions never occurred. The forensic analyst took the stand, dissecting every false timestamp, every doctored figure. Dean's lawyers shifted uncomfortably, sensing defeat. Then came the decisive strike. Patricia placed a new folder before the judge. Your Honor, in light of these fraudulent accusations, my client is countersuing Mr. Keller and his associate, Ilya Morrow, for defamation and falsifying legal evidence. The courtroom buzzed with tension, Dean's facade crumbling as the weight of his failure settled in. I held his gaze, letting the drama of the moment sink in. This was the end of his schemes, and he knew it. The courtroom fell silent, a heavy stillness that roared in my ears. Dean's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering frantically, his face drained of color, jaw locked tight. Finally, the lawyer rose, clearing his throat. Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw his claims. Of course, he did, cornered. He had no other move. The judge nodded, her voice firm. Motion dismissed. Furthermore, Mr. Keller will cover all legal costs. Dean's defeat was absolute, the weight of his failure palpable. As we left the courthouse, he brushed past me, silent, his presence a fading storm. I let him take a few steps, then whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. We're done here. A surge of peace, long forgotten, washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt unburdened. No more court battles, no more threats lurking in the shadows, no more waking in the dead of night, heart pounding with dread over Dean's next scheme. I had triumphed, but it wasn't the cinematic victory I'd once imagined. There were no fireworks, no grand speeches, just a quiet stillness, like the calm after a tempest when the clouds linger, but the thunder has faded. That silence, once menacing, now felt like a gift, a promise of new beginnings. 2 days later, I sat across from Patricia for our final meeting. She slid a stack of papers across her desk, her expression calm but satisfied. It's over. Dean signed the settlement. I exhaled slowly, my fingers grazing the documents before lifting them. I skimmed the terms, though I knew them by heart. Dean got nothing, not a cent. His financial claims were crushed, his defamation attempt backfired, his reputation in tatters. He'd sought to ruin me, but he was the one left empty-handed. Patricia leaned back, studying me. How do you feel? A soft laugh escaped, more breath than sound. Weightless. Lighter. She smiled. Good. You've earned that. I nodded, slipping the papers into my bag. This was the end, the final chapter closed. I stood, extending my hand. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. She shook it firmly. Go live your life, Sarah. You deserve it. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. That evening, Beatrice and my mother insisted on a celebratory dinner. Margot enveloped me in a warm embrace as I entered her home, her eyes brimming with relief. It's finished, she whispered. Yes, I murmured, a quiet conviction in my voice. It is. Beatrice poured champagne, raising her glass with a sly grin. To freedom, and to never letting a man think he can outsmart you again. I clinked my glass against hers, laughter bubbling up. I'll drink to that. We dined, shared stories, and reminisced, the weight of months lifting with every moment. I wasn't glancing over my shoulder, bracing for the next blow. The war was over, and I stood on the other side, unbroken. Later that night, I stood on my balcony, the Chicago skyline glittering before me, an endless sea of lights stretching into the horizon. The world felt transformed. I was no longer the woman who ignored the red flags, who clung to the illusion of security and forever. I'd lost trust, time, and the love I thought I knew, but I'd gained something greater: resilience, clarity, control. My phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number flashing. Without hesitation, I blocked it, a quiet act of defiance. I turned to my laptop, opening a blank document, the cursor blinking like an invitation. A new chapter, a new narrative, my narrative. As I closed the laptop, I whispered into the night, "This is my story now." Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it, often through the betrayal of those we hold closest. But I've learned this: strength isn't about dodging betrayal, it's about rising from its ashes. Standing at the precipice of my marriage, I could have let it shatter me, let fear and doubt consume me. Instead, I fought not just for my wealth, but for my dignity, my freedom, my future. If betrayal has ever blindsided you, if the ground has ever vanished beneath your feet, know this: you are not alone. Life may hurl its worst at you, but in those moments, you uncover your true power. Sometimes, walking away from what no longer serves you is the greatest triumph of all. I want to hear your story. Have you ever had to fight for yourself against impossible odds? Share your thoughts below. I read everyone. If this resonated, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell. There's so much more to come. Until next time, stay fierce, stay sharp, and never let anyone dim your strength.